Coronavirus infections exceed 100,000 worldwide. Here in France, the authorities are scrambling to contain an outbreak in the city of Mulhouse, traced to a meeting of an evangelical church. Fresh clashes between Greek police and migrants at the border with Turkey. This as Athens says an EU Ankara deal on restricting migration to Europe is now dead. And suicide bombing targets the US embassy in Tunis. 2 people on a motorbike blew themselves up in the Tunisian capital, killing 1 policeman and wounding several others. Those are our top stories this hour on France 24. I'm Alexander Orcott. Now, the French authorities are scrambling to contain a COVID-19 coronavirus outbreak in the city of Mulhouse, situated near the German and Swiss borders. It has seen its number of cases skyrocket in the past week. The French government considering more radical measures to tackle the virus that so far infected some 613 people on its soil. Colin Kinnebra has the latest.
A new leap in the spread of coronavirus in France, with the number of confirmed cases jumping by nearly 50% in just 24 hours. The French government maintains, though, that the spread of the disease remains at stage 2, falling short of a full-blown epidemic.
The virus is present in parts of the country. It is spreading, but it is not present throughout the country. I reiterate our strategy for stage 2, to do everything we can to slow the virus's spread and to slow the arrival of an epidemic.
Echoing President Emmanuel Macron, though, Philippe recognized that France would inevitably move into phase 3 in the coming weeks. That would mean far more restrictive measures, including shutting down schools and public transit, as well as banning almost all public gatherings. For now, such measures will be partially implemented in 2 of France's 101 departments. Philippe announced that dozens of schools in the Haut-Rhin and Oise departments will close for 2 weeks, starting Monday. Visiting an elderly home in Paris earlier Friday, President Macron also urged people to step up voluntary precautions, including limiting visits to the elderly.
When this epidemic comes, we will have to find ways of functioning for several weeks with a lot of resilience by protecting the most vulnerable, in particular, our elders.
A measure he recognized could be, quote, heartbreaking. The Northeast is France's worst-hit region, with at least 150 of the 600-plus coronavirus cases recorded to date.
Elsewhere, health ministers from 20 EU member states have agreed to take part in a joint procurement procedure to buy protective medical gear as part of the bloc's collective effort to fight the coronavirus. It follows an emergency meeting in Brussels to ensure, among other things, a bidding war doesn't begin for medical supplies that would create a spike in prices.
Time is now critical because we do have a very evolving situation. The spread of COVID-19 is a test of, of the resilience of our health systems. We need to ensure that there are sufficient financial and human resources made available, because we need to ensure hospital capacities, training of medical personnel and all the healthcare workforce, the availability of protective equipment, and also what we need to do in terms of protecting higher risk groups.
Meanwhile, over in the United States, a mammoth cruise ship has been denied entry to San Francisco due to coronavirus concerns, with 21 cases already confirmed aboard and several more people reporting symptoms. Federal officials say they're now working on a plan to bring the Grand Princess ship to a non-commercial port so that all 3,500 passengers and crew can be tested. Now, with all this reporting about the COVID-19 coronavirus, it's normal for some of you to feel anxiety, though the risk to most people around the world does remain very low. Charlie James has this guide on the virus, its symptoms, and how you can protect yourselves and your families.
The novel coronavirus belongs to the same family as prior outbreaks you've heard of, such as MERS and SARS. However, this virus does appear to be much less deadly. The WHO predicts the mortality rate will be 1 to 2%. The disease it causes is called COVID-19, a respiratory illness that spreads from person to person through droplets produced when someone coughs or sneezes. The majority of cases are mild, and most people don't feel sick at all.
80 to 85% of people will not have anything. Now, among those 15 to 20 people who will have, the vast majority, again, 85% of those 20% or 15%, have a mild kind of a flu. And only a very small number will have severe symptoms.
Symptoms can include low-grade fever and a cough. Others also experience fatigue, headaches, or diarrhea. For serious infections, complications can include pneumonia in the lungs, organ failure, and in extreme cases, death. So who is at higher risk? Elderly people. In China, the average age of people who have died is in the 70s. Others at risk, those with pre-existing health conditions, people who smoke, and frontline health workers. At this time, there are no vaccines or cures for this coronavirus. The best thing you can do is to take some basic steps to lessen your chances of contracting it. Number 1, hand washing regularly and for at least 20 seconds with soap and water. Also, avoid close contact with sick people or traveling to areas with known large outbreaks. Disinfect objects and surfaces you touch a lot, like your phone, and stop touching your face.
We move on now to northern Syria, where fighting has broken out in Idlib province just hours into a ceasefire between Turkey and Russia. Monitoring groups said that regime forces and jihadist insurgents were involved in the clashes. Elsewhere, however, residents and opposition groups are reporting that the truce does appear to be holding across many parts of the region. Andrew Hillier has more.
There's an eerie sense of normality in the town of Idlib, a day after a ceasefire deal meant to end weeks of bloodshed. But residents here don't think it's likely to last. They're worried it will fizzle out, like so many other deals that have fallen through in the past.
How am I supposed to believe that there's a truce if I'm listening to the sounds of jets and bombing? That means there's no real truce.
I'm not at all hopeful regarding this agreement, and I'm not expecting anything from it. Those people don't respect any commitments.
There were reports of fighting in southern parts of Idlib province, but elsewhere, the ceasefire signed on Thursday between Turkey and Russia appears to have put an end to the violence that has displaced almost 1 million people, at least for now. The two sides came to an agreement after 6 hours of negotiations between Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Vladimir Putin. It comes after recent fighting between the Syrian army, backed by Russia, and Turkish forces that left dozens of troops dead on both sides. The deal creates a 6-kilometer deep corridor on either side of the M4 highway that runs from east to west, which will be jointly patrolled by Russian and Turkish forces. But the ceasefire is fragile. Erdogan insists that Turkey reserves the right to retaliate with full force to any attacks on its soldiers.
Meanwhile, EU foreign ministers meeting in Zagreb, Croatia, have condemned what they see as Turkey's use of desperate migrants in a bid to apply political pressure on Europe to support its Syrian operations. Greek police fired tear gas during fresh clashes with the migrants at the border with Turkey, as Athens said the 2016 EU-Ankara deal containing the flow of migrants to Europe is now, quote, dead. Well, last week, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan declared his country would no longer stop so-called refugees trying to leave. France 24's Catherine Norris-Trent earlier sent this update.
I'm in Edirne, a town on the Turkish border with Greece, and just a few kilometers from here is the border crossing of Pazarkule, and that is where repeated clashes have been breaking out. Migrants telling us in that camp, thousands of people still camping there, they're telling us that fresh clashes have been broken out tonight, reporting tear gas being fired, some saying they've heard shots. Although that information is not yet confirmed, we have to say that it's very difficult to get any confirmed information because Turkish police have sealed off that immediate border crossing area, not letting any journalists in to independently verify facts. So we're relying on trying to corroborate witness accounts from people still stuck there in the border area between Turkey and Greece. And we've been obtaining video pictures from one of our sources in the camp showing us very many people still sleeping there. A week after Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that Turkey's border to the European Union at this Turkish-Greek border was open and people sleeping out in the open air. They've been making makeshift shelters, but they've been exposed largely to the elements, and it is very cold here at night. And they're telling us there have been food shortages too. We've seen pictures of long lines of people queuing up to get meals, hundreds of people standing in line. A lot of people there are getting increasingly frustrated and angry.
2 suicide bombers on a motorbike blew themselves up outside the US embassy in the Tunisian capital on Friday around noon. 1 police officer was killed and several more people were injured in the area, including one who's said to be in a critical condition. Tunisia remains in a state of emergency since 2015 as it continues to struggle to contain the threat of terrorism posed by both the Islamic State group and Al-Qaeda, though no one has yet claimed responsibility. Camille Nedelec has the story.
The ground speckled with debris and blood in the wake of an attack by 2 suicide bombers who blew themselves up near the main gate of the US embassy in the Berge du Lac district of Tunis. One witness said they charged at police on their motorbike, while others described their disbelief.
I was in my office about 200 meters away from the blast. When we heard the first explosion, we thought it was gas or a car tire exploding. And then we heard sirens and shouting, and I came out here.
Forensic police and sniffer dogs got to work as a helicopter flew overhead. The US Embassy on Twitter urged people to stay away from the area. It's the most serious attack in months, and there was no immediate claim of responsibility. Last summer, Islamic State admitted it was behind 2 attacks on the same day, both targeting police. Tunisia has been in a state of emergency since 2015 after jihadists attacked a museum in March and a resort in June, killing a total of 60 people, mainly tourists.
Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of the Archbishop of Lyon. Philippe Barbarin has been caught up in a French sex abuse case, convicted of failing to report a paedophile priest in his diocese. His conviction was overturned in January. Nonetheless, the Pope still granted the powerful Catholic leader's resignation. Charlie James tells us more.
Exactly 1 year after receiving the initial request, Pope Francis has granted French Cardinal Philippe Barberin's resignation.
For all of us, this resignation comes as no surprise. He announced it and re-announced it. But for all that, we feel that we are living a very important moment in the diocese. A page is being turned.
The Pope had first refused Barberin's request, pending the outcome of an appeal of his conviction for failing to report a pedophile priest. Last March, Barbarin was found guilty of not reporting Bernard Prenat, who abused dozens of Boy Scouts in the 1980s and 90s. After that ruling, he announced he would offer his resignation.
Regardless of my personal fate, I would like to reiterate my compassion for the victims and the place they and their families have in my prayers. I have decided to go to the Holy Father to give him my resignation.
Barberin's conviction was in fact overturned on appeal in January. The judges deemed he isn't criminally liable because the incidents happened too long ago. Still, the cardinal again asked Pope Francis to allow him to resign. Barbarin was twice told of the abuse by Prenat and by one of his victims, but has maintained it wasn't his place to report it. Prenat has been defrocked and is awaiting a March 16th ruling in his sex abuse trial.
Those are all our top stories this hour, but if you want any more on any of those and more, do visit our website, france24.com. It's available in English, French, Spanish and Arabic. As you can see there, our top story is on the coronavirus situation here in France. 613 people confirmed infected so far. The president saying that a full-blown epidemic is thought to be inevitable. Stay tuned to France 24. More news headlines coming up.